Colorado Buffalo's quarterback Shedeur Sanders is one of the consensus big three quarterback prospects of 2024.
Obviously, the Raiders, you have the Raiders. You believe you have the Raiders taking Shedeur Sanders, right?
I do, yes.
For this list, we're only focusing on teams that may realistically search for a new quarterback next year. So, with that, let's dive right into the 5 best possible landing spots for Shedeur Sanders in 2025, as well as the 5 worst. Best, Dallas Cowboys. Team chaos all the way. The Cowboys have been the NFL's media darlings since the 90s. Whether they're good, terrible, or mediocre, America's team will always be a global hotspot for sports coverage and front-page news. So now imagine if Shedeur landed with the Cowboys, his old man's former team. You know Deion Sanders is going to go above and beyond to build up his son's reputation and brand. But primetime wouldn't have to do that much work if his son landed in Dallas. The elder Sanders played for the Cowboys from 1995 to 99, leading the franchise to a Super Bowl 30 championship in the 95 season, the franchise's last Lombardi Trophy triumph. You wouldn't be able to write a much more entertaining story if Shedeur followed his old man's footsteps and joined the Cowboys 3 decades later. Suddenly, football's most hated team, dare we say, will attract more bandwagon fans than ever before. Dak Prescott is heading into the final year of his contract with the Cowboys. If Jerry Jones doesn't keep him beyond 2024, why not throw all the chips in and move up to draft Shedeur? Jerry cares more about the Cowboys brand than winning on the field anyway, so of course he could sell the farm to Lance Shedeur. Not to mention that he'd be in a good spot with CeeDee Lamb as his top wide receiver, and also having a top-tier offensive line blocking for him. It's unlikely that Shedeur actually lands in Dallas, but that doesn't mean that they're not the ideal landing spot for him. Worst, New York Jets. At first glance, what's the harm of Shedeur Sanders learning behind Aaron Rodgers for a year or two before replacing the future Hall of Famer as the new face of the New York Jets? And if you're primetime, why wouldn't you want your son to play in the nation's biggest market? Well, let's remind you that Jetsland has been a graveyard for young quarterbacks. Mark Sanchez was supposed to be the franchise savior, then Geno Smith, then Sam Darnold, then Zach Wilson. Rodgers will make the Jets contenders in 2024 because he's been playing for almost 2 decades now. He's a 4-time MVP, Super Bowl champion, and future Canton member. But Sanders, well, we don't want to imagine the media circus and clown show that would transpire if he landed with the Jets. This feels like a nightmare scenario where Shedeur would get too caught up in the New York spotlight and worry more about growing his name and brand more than anything else. And the Jets, being the Jets, would be loosey-goosey and do nothing to try and keep him focused on football. So please, not the Jets. We don't need them wasting another promising QB prospect. Just anywhere but the Jets. Best, Seattle Seahawks. The Seattle Seahawks have a great mix of veteran stars and young studs on both sides of the ball. DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, Jackson Smith-Njigba, Kenneth Walker, Devin Witherspoon, Reek Woolen, Byron Murphy II, and Boye Mafe. If there's one question mark, however, it's a long-term picture at quarterback. 2022 Comeback Player of the Year Geno Smith has 2 years remaining on his deal, and it's hard to envision Seattle extending him once this deal runs up. You know, when he'll be 36 years of age. Ideally, the Seahawks find Smith's successor in next year's QB-heavy draft class. And ideally, that quarterback would be Shedeur Sanders. Seattle has been a consistent playoff contender over the past decade, and Sanders would be joining a top-flight offense with 3 capable 1,000-yard receivers, a star running back, and a talented young defense. Seahawks OC Ryan Grubb did wonders with Michael Penix Jr. at Washington before coming to Mike McDonald's staff. We have no doubt that Grubb would make it work with a can't-miss talent like Sanders. And if Shedeur isn't ready to start in 2025, well, there's no shame in learning behind Smith for a year before taking over the reins in 2026. Worst, New Orleans Saints. The Saints may have Derek Carr under contract for 3 more seasons, but don't be shocked if another mediocre season on his end leads to GM Mickey Loomis finding a successor in next month's NFL draft. Another lackluster season from Carr in the Big Easy could easily land the Saints a top 5 or 10 pick that would put them in position to select Shedeur Sanders. But if you are Deion's son, New Orleans ought to be on your please no shortlist. The Saints are an aging team that is nowhere close to title contention. Franchise stars Marshawn Lattimore, Alvin Kamara, Cameron Jordan, Demario Davis, and Tyrann Mathieu aren't getting any younger, and Chris Olave is the only proven young star on this roster. The Saints have a horrible long-term salary cap outlook, which would prevent the front office from building a winner around Sanders. He needs to join a team with A, an established long-term path, and B, plenty of young young franchise cornerstone pieces. He won't get that in New Orleans, where 7 to 10 wins a season is enough to please ownership. Best, Los Angeles Rams. The Rams are an interesting team because they have enough veteran star power to win now, but also plenty of young talent in place that'll keep their competitive window open long term. There's just too much to love about the idea of Shedeur Sanders coming to Los Angeles, and not just because it's a giant market that would quickly grow its name. Sean McVay has already established himself as one of the all-time great quarterback gurus, so we have no doubt that the Super Bowl 56 winning head coach would manage to fully unlock Shedeur's potential. Not only that, but Shedeur would benefit nicely from learning behind veteran star Matthew Stafford for a little while before taking over the QB1 job. With Puka Nacua and Kyron Williams as his main weapons, Shedeur would have a strong supporting cast to build around. Also, GM Les Snead has a knack for grabbing big-time studs after day one of the draft, so of course there won't be a problem building a sustainable winner around Shedeur. Did we mention the idea of Shedeur playing in the massive Los Angeles market? No matter which perspective you take, Shedeur to the Rams just makes way too much sense. Worst, Tampa Bay Buccaneers. We know the Buccaneers just handed Baker Mayfield a $100 million extension over 3 years, but the structure of his deal allows the Buccaneers to get out of it after 2 years if they so desire. If Tampa Bay is in a position to snag a top QB prospect next year, they may feel inclined to plan life without Mayfield, especially if he regresses from his career year. But if you're Shedeur Sanders, you ought to hope that the Bucs aren't your next landing spot. The Buccaneers' competitive window is rapidly closing. Franchise mainstays Levante David and Mike Evans are both on the wrong side of 30, and Chris Godwin is entering the final year of his contract. The Bucs just don't have enough young talent in place to remain a long-term contender compared to the NFC heavyweights. If Shedeur lands in Tampa, his only playmaker might be Evans, who is a receiver now in his mid-30s. There are way better landing spots for Sanders than Tampa. Best, Las Vegas Raiders. For those hoping to see Shedeur Sanders land in a big market, you won't find many better options than Sin City itself. Vegas has suddenly emerged as a sports hotspot since the Golden Knights came to the NHL in 2017. The Raiders followed suit 3 years later, and the Oakland Athletics MLB franchise is projected to land in Vegas by 2028. Now, what if the Raiders added to Vegas' growing sports momentum by landing an elite quarterback prospect in Shedeur Sanders? Las Vegas is finally turning a corner now that they seemingly have the right coach in Antonio Pierce, who rallied the team to a strong finish last year after replacing Josh McDaniels midseason. And the weaponry. Oh, yes, the weaponry. Future Hall of Fame wide receiver Devontae Adams, can't miss rookie tight end Brock Bowers, secondary guys like Jacoby Myers, Michael Mayer, and Zamir White. How could Shedeur not produce in this star-studded offense? Many were shocked that Vegas didn't come away with a quarterback in the 2024 NFL Draft. But if it all works out in the end, then they might just get their guy next year. So if you're simply on team wanting Shedeur Sanders to succeed, you should hope that the Raiders are the lucky winners of his sweepstakes next year. Worst, Cleveland Browns. If Deshaun Watson doesn't turn it around in 2024, the Browns may have to consider moving on from their $230 million QB. As we've said before, it is a bad look for Watson when you remember that Jacoby Brissett was better than him in 2022, and that 38-year-old Joe Flacco was also miles better than Watson last year. So if Watson flops again, and if the Browns find themselves in a spot to take a quarterback, should Shedeur Sanders cross his fingers and hope to land with the AFC North club?
How about no?
Browns fans don't want to hear it, but their competitive window is not open long-term. Amari Cooper is entering his age 30 season. Nick Chubb is far from a guarantee to regain his elite form after a gruesome season-ending knee injury. Joel Bitonio, Jack Conklin, Wyatt Teller, and Zadarius Smith will be all on the wrong side of 30 by next year. Plus, imagine if Shedeur headed to a division where he has to face the Baltimore Ravens, Cincinnati Bengals, and Pittsburgh Steelers a combined 6 times a season. No thanks. And if you're a believer in coincidence, then Shedeur is bound to join the likes of Tim Couch, Brady Quinn, Brandon Whedon, Johnny Manziel, and Baker Mayfield as highly touted QBs who failed to succeed in Cleveland. It would just be so typical of the Browns to draft Sanders and just ruin his potential. Best, Pittsburgh Steelers. The Steelers upgraded their QB room by drafting Russell Wilson and trading for Justin Fields, but both are only under contract for 1 more year. Unless either of them lights it up in 2024, Pittsburgh could find themselves searching for a new quarterback following the Kenny Pickett disaster. Sanders' talents would not be wasted in a model organization like Pittsburgh's. They have a Hall of Fame coach in Mike Tomlin, an elite defense every year, and a prolific set of weapons headlined by George Pickens, Najee Harris, Jalen Warren, and Pat Freiermuth. The O-line has 2 potential All-Pro talents in Broderick Jones and Troy Fautanu, Pittsburgh's last 2 first-round picks. If Tomlin could go to the postseason with Mason Rudolph, just imagine what he could do with a grade A QB prospect like Shedeur Sanders. Worst, New York Giants. Many believe the Giants would use the number 6 pick on Daniel Jones' replacement, but they decided to take LSU wide receiver Malik Neighbors instead. The good news for the Giants is they can get out of Jones' awful $160 million contract next year with very few financial ramifications. The bad news, if you're Shedeur Sanders, is that the Giants may very well be in play for your services. There really isn't much to like about this Giants team from a long-term perspective. Even if Neighbors comes as advertised, who else will make plays on offense? Saquon Barkley is long gone, and the offensive line outside of Andrew Thomas is a complete disaster. And like we said on the Jets entry, it just feels like the New York market and Cirques will get to Sanders very quickly. And like the Jets, the Giants are the type of organization that would just let it all slide. New York will in all likelihood draft a new quarterback next year. Let's just all hope it's not Shedeur Sanders. But where do you think Shedeur Sanders will land in the 2025 NFL Draft? Let us know in the comment section below. If you liked this video and learned a thing or two, clicking the like button helps out a ton, and hey, we appreciate it. If this is your first time coming around to TPS though, subscribing is a great idea because we put out videos like this every single day. But as always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.